So let me open the floor. So we ready to go. I'm just want to say good evening. The purpose of today's Stabilization Fund Oversight Committee meeting is to present the subcommittee members a draft model for the creation of a review committee and a mechanism for the disbursements of funds according to the city ordinance. Jeremy will be in charge of the PowerPoint presentation. After the PowerPoint presentation, I will entertain any questions from the floor to be addressed to Jeremy. Jeremy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you all for your time. I'm not sure if I've met all of you. My name is Jeremy. I'm one of the attorneys with the law department. I just have a brief presentation here, and I believe the actual slides were sent out by email, so doesn't look like I'm able to get this up on the screen right now, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to proceed anyway. So as was already said, the purpose of the recommendations that I'm going to be presenting today is just to create a vehicle to allow for the funds that have been collected since 2019 in compliance with the special order by the council to be dispersed and allow those funds to actually be used out in the community. The model that we're going to present today is designed the way it is, so there's maximum community input, and we're hoping to have some form of community engagement in the proposal process so that the projects that the surrounding community actually deems to be most necessary are the ones that the community councils eventually present to the review committee. In speaking with the councilwoman, we distinguished that there would be 6 separate phases before we reach the completion and the final fund disbursement. We're currently in phase 1. So that would be the approval of the review committee, structure, and defining its role. Within that phase, there's going to be several parts, including determining how much of the available funds will be extinguished, how many rounds of funding there will be. Will this be an annual meeting or annual disbursement, biannual? There's currently, and I'm not aware of any additional funds being added within the last several months. So there's currently just short of 1.7 million in the funds. And the current model the model that we're going to be suggesting today would allow for those funds to be dispersed to the community through the local city, Springfield City Community Councils, which will be designating representatives to sit on the review committee. The second phase would be the actual creation of the committee. So actually nominating those review committee members. I'm sorry, I skipped a step. Step 2 would be creating the committee by city council approval. Step 3 would be the recruitment and appointment and the creation of the scoring rubric and the request for proposals, what's actually going to be sent out into the community. What are the community council members actually going to have when they're speaking to the various departments that will actually be spearheading the projects, the projects being primarily run by the Parks Department or DPW, just by the nature of what the order allows for the funds to be spent on. And then the final 2 phases would be the collection of the proposals and scoring using the rubrics that would be created by the committee, and finally fund disbursement. So currently, based on the amount of community councils, we are suggesting that there be between 5 to 9 members on the review committee. The members should be appointed from nominees submitted by the various community councils. Currently, the special order is written so that the neighborhoods that are designated in the guidance from the CCC for identifying areas of disproportionate impact and any Springfield area that is 1.5 miles from a dispensary. One of the things that this committee is going to have, or subcommittee is going to have to rule in on, make a determination is what, which of the dispensaries are going to be considered active Not all of them are operational, but there are just short of a dozen that have received host community agreements from the city. I believe we have about 6 of them which are actually operational, and several more which will be coming online within the next calendar year. So that's just language to be aware of. The second paragraph on that slide says affected communities. That's a term that this committee is going to have to define before proceeding and determining where the funds are going to be dispersed. Another determination that needs to be made prior to the final copy of this outline being presented before the full council is what percentage of the funds are going to be dispersed. Like I said before, there's about 1.7 million. I spoke to the Parks Department, inquired about some of the funding and the expenditures from one of their recent park renovations. And based on their administration, they suggest that no less than 210 to 250,000 be designated for each project that would fall under their jurisdiction. And I'm hearing similar numbers for smaller DPW projects. So I believe there are 6 neighborhood councils. So if you extinguish 75% of the fund, that would draw 210 to each of the 6 councils. So in order to guarantee that all 6 of the local community councils receive enough funding to do any meaningful or substantial community project that would be that would have oversight by either parks or DPW, we're looking at dispersing about 90% of the available funds. And if you choose to do a second round in later years, you would have to wait for the fund to be replenished by the sales tax, a 3% sales tax that comes back to the city of Springfield after the CCC collects it at the point of sale. So that's another consideration, whether the entire 1.7 is going to be used or if it's going to be a more phased disbursement of the funds. But as the order is written currently, that's within your discretion. The proposals, we're recommending that the proposals be collected from the neighborhood councils, as I said before, and scored by the review committee, which will be made up of their designees. In order for any of the projects suggested by the proposals to be awarded any funds, they have to meet the purpose of the order. And the order's purpose, stated purpose, is educational and recreational programming for youth and adults, neighborhood business incentives, improvements to infrastructure, or recreational and community sites. And as stated before, it has to be within one of the designated census tracts as defined by the CCC's guidance, and or we're interpreting this as or 1.5 miles from a dispensary. And again, that's something that's going to have to be defined by this subcommittee. An additional recommendation, just for the ease of process for this particular part of the outline, is that every proposal be presented to the review committee after city department review, meaning that if the community council wants to use the funds to renovate a park, that the Parks Department is already on board, already has reviewed the estimates. They have okayed the man hours that it would take, because this is going to be placing an additional burden on the operation of the departments as they're moving forward with their usual budget. This would just increase their funding, but not necessarily increase their labor force and their other resources. So to make sure that these projects aren't going to just be suggested, voted on, and then approved, and the funds sitting in a general operation budget for any of the departments that would be overseeing the projects, the suggestion is that the department be present at the final review meeting and that the proposal the proposal be vetted by whatever department would be overseeing the work. And the last slide is actually a map of the city with the census tracts in yellow. The census tracts are what were designated by the CCC in their guidance. All the yellow census tracts are designated as disproportionately impacted areas by the period of time that cannabis was criminalized. All of the pink dots, it may be too small for you to actually read the words, but all of the pink dots are the dispensaries that have HCAs currently. From round 1 and round 2 of the responses to requests for proposals for the city, for the cannabis dispensaries, those are marked with the pink dots. The red circles are the 1.5 mile radius around those dispensaries with HCAs. So with the most liberal reading of the order, the bottom portion of the map that does not fall within those red circles would not qualify for any of the funds, any of the 1.7 million in the stabilization fund currently. So if you were to redo this map, just considering the dispensaries that are actually operational, so that would remove Primus on State Street, Kerr Amber on Boston Road, Lemonade in the South End, and one other. It would actually limit the area that the city is actually able to disperse the funds. But again, that's open to interpretation. And my final point, before I turn it back over to the Councilwoman, would be that currently the city does not have any documentation of the cannabis dispensaries actually causing any negative impact to the areas directly surrounding where they're actually operating. So about 2 years ago, the CCC changed the guidelines as to how community impact fees could be collected from the dispensaries. It was at one point similar to how we're receiving this money from the taxes that are levied from the sales. It was 3% of gross revenue. Since then, it has become an invoicing type of scheme where the city would document any costs associated with the operation of a dispensary within their city limits. And at the end of the licensing year, the dispensary would reach out to the law department or the mayor's office and request an itemized invoice showing the actual costs. So we're no longer able to bill for a blanket amount based on their revenue. It's solely what the actual impact was. And for the last 2.5 to 3 years, the city just has not documented any costs. So speaking to the portion of the outline that addresses what an affected neighborhood is, it is my opinion, and it could be interpreted from the city's inability to actually document any cost, that the entire area that's surrounded or that's circled in red should be eligible for the funds, because whether the dispensary is operational or not, the impact to the community is essentially the same, and they have received an HCA from the city. So is there anything?
No. So one of the things when I charged the department to look into this model was the transparency with the involvement of community members. So at this point, I neglected to say that we are present by my colleague, City Council Lavar Bruce, City Council Zaira Goban, City Council Tim Allen, and City Council Melvin Edwards. Further of the discussion, I will open the floor for questions based on the information that have been submitted. So the floor is open for questions.
I'll start. Hi, how are you? My apologies. I try to get here as quick as I could. When you were talking, perhaps, actually, if anybody else, I just got multiple questions, but you mentioned about the dispensaries not being open. I know that there's no way, so all the dispensaries that have a license did not contribute to the fund. Does that really impact anything in regards to the expenditure of funds?
So statutorily, no. You have the ability to disperse it anywhere in the map where it's circled in red. It's not necessarily broken down by
That contribution.
contributions.
Okay.
And from speaking with accounting, and I would have to verify this to be 100% sure, we don't actually get that accounting. We just get a disbursement and a number. So we don't actually know who, what the actual gross revenue of each dispensary is.
To be honest, I think first of all, greatly appreciate the work that you put into this. It's a lot to digest. I'm not really sure. I mean, I heard so much, and it seemed like a lot. So I'll bow to any of the other counselors because I need some more time to kind of digest what you said and then read over it and then try to kind of reconnect it together.
So could I entertain something when I began, as the chair of the committee? I had put in process, phase 1, phase 2, and 3, and so on. Today, we're not gonna discuss all the steps for the completion. The first step that I see discussing today and then having another subcommittee meeting is the approval of the review committee and the structure. How are we gonna go by the structure only? And I said that at the beginning of the first meeting. So it's not an approval, go ahead, we're gonna take it step by step so we can make it all right.
Okay.
And as I emphasized at the first meeting, I was looking for a mechanism that we did have for point of transparency, community input. And it's based on the proposal of recommendation that you see on the first page. So the first step for today on phase 1 is to discuss the mechanism of putting together, how do we gonna go about if we get to the other phases of putting a mechanism together? And for the counselors to comment on it, and what do they foresee seeing that is presented today that we need to make addendum to the draft or even accept the draft itself? That's the point of the meeting for today, for point of clarification.
Thank you, and I apologize for missing the very beginning.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So thank you very much for having this meeting, and I do have to leave. I have a client at 1:30, but I did want to, I don't know if you need to take a vote, and that's the reason that we're here for quorum. But a question that I had was regarding the, you said that the Cannabis Commission is now requiring the cities to demonstrate that they have been negatively impacted. How are they going to account for the past impact that has happened because of, like you said, the criminalization of marijuana at the time and how those neighborhoods were impacted? Are they still taking that into consideration, or do you know, sir?
Jeremy,
If
you have
do
the
you mind?
floor, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the Cannabis Control Commission has set up separate mechanisms. They have they have something that kind of mirrors this type of fund where the money is basically put back into job training and helping minority and women-owned dispensaries get their doors open. So there is something that not necessarily is attributed to the sales tax, the money from the sales tax, but the community, some of that does go to address those issues. They've also put additional regulations in that would require municipalities when accepting additional requests for proposals to have separate policies and separate procedures for dealing with minority-owned dispensaries and dispensaries that would be opening in the tracks that are marked in yellow on the last page of the PowerPoint.
Okay, all right, thank you. Madam Chair, I do have to leave. I don't know if we need to take a vote. I think this is a great first step, like you said, and I would certainly vote for us to move forward in making this happen as soon as possible.
So for
I'm just letting.
consideration to Councilor Gavon, what you just heard about the forming of the committee, I will entertain, to continue to a next meeting, digest any questions, and I will do that because this is a complex project, and I wanna have as much input to be in transparency, that we formed this meeting as informational, and in the second part of the meeting, if we have any comments to make, when it comes to the formation of the structure in the committee, we have the other meeting, and then we go for phase one on a vote.
Okay, so my own clarification and for counselors as well. This was just informational.
Correct.
We leave this meeting today with our homework being prepared to come back to discuss phase one. And
Exactly. And then probably at the second meeting, then one is approved because we have discussed today, phase one, and just is for point of approval. We go into phase two. How do we?
phase two should be informational at
creation-
that second meeting.
Exactly, the creation of the committee.
That's
So any questions that be in charge from the committee, we could address properly,
Thank you.
okay?
If I may, just to be a little bit more pointed, the major considerations in addition to whatever you think of is what proportion or what the funding timeline is gonna look like. Is this gonna be a single disbursement of funds, the extinguishment of the funds altogether, or the suggestion of 75 or 90? Because I think that needs to be part of the formal structure, because if you extinguish the funds, then the committee would be a one-time.
So, when you discuss that, I'm looking at phase six, that it was the fund disbursement. So,
So, I mean, the way I anticipated the fund disbursement is like writing checks.
okay,
What I'm looking to do is for the structure of the review committee to encompass how much is going to be.
Expended at one time.
Expended at one
Because
time.
right now you get a set amount right now.
right,
And you don't have all of the awarded dispensaries operational, so they're not even all contributing. The ones that are open are contributing as they stand right now on ongoing basis, but their revenues aren't coming in at the same time they're going to the state. But we can anticipate, say, a year from now, there will be more. So even if we say, for example, if we used up 90% of it, that will leave 10%, but a year to next year, it may not be at the same 1.7 million, but it would be maybe at $200,000 because, so it's, but so what you reading, if I'm reading correctly, what you'd like for us to, when we come back next time, be able to say, we want to expend 75, 90%, 80% on a yearly basis, or do we want it to have a one-time expenditure of 75, 80, 90%? And then wait and look at it again in 2 years, or when it's coming back to hitting a certain, we could set a goal.
Because that's gonna speak to how many projects you can entertain. Because if you're only funding each project for 100,000, the parks department has said basically you're not gonna get anything done with that.
And they don't, and the other consideration is for, as his colleagues, would be the fact that depending on the scope of the project, the necessary bidding process, and the time that it takes to do the work, we probably, just for us to be aware that if we're doing it, you're not, once a year might be too quick, because the first project wouldn't be done in a year, it may not even start in a year. So that's just something for us to think about.
so the purpose for the next meeting, you wanna like us to, discuss based on the report by my colleague, Melvin Edwards. I think through the step of completion, let's charge the counselors, the subcommittee, and I have a quorum with that part of the portion for the next, meeting. And then we approve it and we could discuss in more detail, because I know Councilor Gavon has to leave because she had a previous appointment. And I know that if that's the fact, then I'm gonna do what is called the approval of the review committee structure for that point. And then discuss, just table the creation of the review committee and have more that discussion about the percentile of the monies and all that that you want requested. That will be the next set agenda for the next meeting. And then we'll follow then with phase two,
Yes.
after we have discussed. See, and that's good because I wanted to have it that way because they all gonna, this is like a puzzle. Once we discuss them and we complete it. So do we entertain a motion? Because I just called it informational for that point.
I
And
don't-
at this
Maria,
time.
Need
Yeah.
a note, correct?
Maria,
Vote on just accepting the concept?
No, not yet.
No, just.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm driving, and I can't really, raise my hand, but I just have one question.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Yeah, thanks. Was there paper, was there any documentation that you guys reviewed? I didn't see any, and I'd just like to get a copy of whatever there is that explains this on paper.
It was mail, Counselor.
Emailed.
Yes.
So email.
It was
to-
emailed, and what, was it emailed today or recently?
No, they have,
Yeah, today,
It,
yeah.
it was recently and again today.
yes.
Yeah, today. I haven't been on my email today, so, okay, I'll look for it. Who did it come from?
City council staff.
Right, correct.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to what we're gonna do, whether or not you need a motion. What is it that you wanna do with the forum?
I don't, nothing, just.
Nothing. It was informational. We
Okay.
call it
So,
informational.
just
And I
information.
set up the footprints for the next meeting.
Okay.
And at the next meeting, then we will be doing some voting. I think that it's more, I want to create a structure, informational and voting. So to leave room for any other questions that might arise, rather to push all this information and run with it and not make sure.
Right.
Yeah,
As the chair of the committee. Okay, so it's informational. So Counselor, thank you for the attendance. I will soon send an email with our next meeting and hopefully we have some other questions that we will be asking and looking forward to see how do we stand in terms of the approval of the review committee structure and role. Thank you so much.